I know you're wondering, what in the world do butterflies, bulldogs, and geese have to do with learning about God? Let's talk about it. Years ago, I always was a person who loved to be outside, loved to study nature. Forgive the glare because my laptop's sitting right there because I'm going to need it in a minute. Um, an observer of nature. Even when I was a small child, I spent a lot of time observing nature. And so God took me down this road years ago. And it was one of the simplest ways I started to understand how God can use practically anything to teach you about Himself. So, what we're using as a scriptural anchor is Romans chapter 1 and verse 20. I'm going to read it for you in the Amplified. I kind of like to use the Amplified because it gives you a lot of more nuance to some things that might be a little unclear. So it reads, "For ever since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes, his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly seen, being understood through his workmanship, all his creation, the wonderful things that he has made, so that they who fail to believe and trust in him are without excuse and without defense." So what this verse basically tells us is that the Lord reveals himself through our day-to-day interactions with everything that he's made, so that whether you ever go to church, whether you ever read a Bible, whether you ever encounter anybody who tries to minister to you about God, you really don't have any excuse because God reveals himself through the things that he's made and created. And that's how I started down this road with butterflies, bulldogs, and geese. So each one of these things, two animals, one insect, has a process or an attribute or a characteristic that reveals something. I'd like to start off with bulldogs. Now, what God taught me about bulldogs, and what you probably already know about bulldogs, is that one of the things that make them so dangerous is that once they grab a hold of something, it's very difficult to get them to let go. In this attribute, we see God showing us about holding on or grasping onto our faith, onto our relationship with Him, and locking in. I read somewhere that a lot of times when a bulldog attacks and they lock their jaw, the only way that they can get that dog to unlock his jaw sometimes is to break the dog's jaw or to kill the dog. And that fascinated me because so many times we're confronted with situations that seek to make us give up, that seek to make us take down, that seek to make us give up on what God's promised us, that seek to make us doubt or release the things that God has told us to hold on to. And through studying bulldogs, I came up with the attribute that I most associated with is tenacity, never giving up, never taking down, always continuing to hold on, to grasp, to lock in into those things that God has given to us, the things that He's told us. Sometimes it gets hard when you're praying through a promise or you're walking through a process. But through the bulldog imagery, it encourages us to lock in and not let go until we see the manifestation of the things that God has promised. Now let's talk about butterflies. I love to talk about butterflies because the process that a butterfly goes through is fascinating. And it really helps to mirror a lot of the transformative processes that we go through as God deals with us. We all know that butterflies start out as caterpillars. They're on the ground. They are not pretty, most of them. Um, they don't look anything like what they will look like after they go through the metamorphosis. And all they do at that stage is eat, 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 so that they can feed the machinery of metamorphosis that is getting ready to transpire inside of them. And then it's like when you first come to God, we need to study, we need to study, we need to study, we need to eat the word, we need to eat the word, we need to eat the word, because that's how we grow in the spirit. That is how we become more acclimated to hearing the voice of God. Because if you don't understand the word of God, you really won't understand how God speaks. And then at a time that's not decided by anything on the outside of this caterpillar. One day they just stop eating and they climb up to wherever they pupate and they spin either a pupa or a cocoon around themselves and they go dormant. And many of us get distracted or discouraged when God takes us through the pupal stage. When we really aren't doing anything, when we really nothing seems to be moving from the outside looking in, there isn't anything moving, but inside there is a miraculous transformation that only you and God can be involved in. So that's why the cocoon is there. Maybe you lose friends, maybe you lose opportunities, maybe you become, somewhat of an outcast, or you just feel withdrawn to a season where it's just you and God, and there's a lot of questioning, and there's a lot of back and forth, and God is showing you a lot of things, but it's kind of hidden. You know what I'm saying? Because nobody can see what's going on inside that cocoon or in that pupa. So it's really one of those just you and God seasons. It can seem lonely, you can seem isolated, but as long as you continue, the machinery of the metamorphosis was in you at every stage. That's the fascinating thing about caterpillars. The pupa stage doesn't look anything like a caterpillar. The pupa stage or the cocoon stage doesn't look anything like the finished butterfly. And so eventually, through the skin of that cocoon or that pupa, you start to see the form of what that butterfly is going to be. And then it has to struggle to get out.